What's going on YouTube? My name's Glenn, this is NTT, and we're bringing you some more tech news that's come out in the past couple of days. And today's a doozy, guys. We're going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2077. And if you guys are excited about this game, let me know down in the comments below. And if you're tired of it being delayed, hit that like button, because I know I am. So without further delay, let's jump into what we got to talk about today, guys. Alright guys, jumping into what we have today, directly from Cyberpunk 2077's Twitter page, we finally have the system requirements for Cyberpunk 2077. Now we did get this a while back, but they were kind of BS, guys. They weren't real. I don't know why CD Projekt Red put them out. They were way too low, but we have an updated system requirements for Cyberpunk 2077. So, if you guys have been highly anticipating this game and ready for this, you've been waiting for this just the same as I have. So let's jump into this, guys. Let's look at it. And so we got a chart just as always for any other game developer, but this time we're separated into a blue and a green section. So our blue section over here, guys, this is for pure rasterization performance. And our green, which funny enough seems like NVIDIA green, doesn't it, is for ray tracing. And if you want to know why that's green, stick around to the end of the video and I'm going to tell you guys why that is, because it's actually really interesting. But we're going to start over here on the blue side, right? And we're going to look at the minimum recommendation. For 1080p low settings, you're going to need a Core i5 3570K or an AMD FX 8310. Guys, these are pretty old CPUs, so you don't need much power to run this game as far as CPU. You need 8 gigs of system memory. That's really low as well. I'm not quite sure too many people are really running 8 gigs anymore, but if you are, you're in luck. You will be able to play Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p on low settings. I don't know if you'll want to, but you can. And you'll need a GTX 780 or Radeon RX 470. 3 gigs of VRAM, obviously that matches these cards up here, and 70 gigs of space. Now they say an SSD is recommended, of course, and that continues as a trend throughout everything else, and I recommend that as well, guys. I would not put this on a hard drive. You're going to want this game to be snappy and loading as fast as it can. You're going to want to put it on an SSD. So let's jump into the recommended side over here. So for 1080p high settings, you need an i7 4790 or a Ryzen 3 3200G. So once again, these are not really powerful CPUs anymore, guys. They're kind of dated. So the fact that you can run the game at 1080p on high settings with these CPUs is pretty impressive. It just really means that this game is more GPU bound rather than CPU bound, even at 1080p. So that's pretty nice, guys. For a lot of you guys, that's going to be a saving grace. So here's the other part though. 12 gigs of memory for system memory. If any of you guys are still running 8 gigs, which like I said before, I'm not quite sure how many of you guys really are out there doing that, the 12 gigs may become a problem. If that's a problem, you guys just need to upgrade anyway. The world is running off of 16 gigs of memory, so upgrade, guys. And you'll need a GTX 1060 6 gig or a 1660 Super, which is also a 6 gig, or a Radeon RX 590, which by the way, sound off in the comments if you've seen an RX 590 in the last year, because I sure have not. But once again, VRAM 6 gigs, obviously that fits for these cards right here within it, and 70 gigs of SSD space. Nothing crazy there, guys, right? And so 1440p, and this is for the high, I'm sorry, for 1440p ultra settings. Now this is where I believe a lot of you guys that actually watch the channel are going to be gaming. Probably more like most people that are going to be playing this game are going to be gaming this at this point. But let's look at this. So you still need an i7 4790 or a Ryzen 3 3200G. Once again, this is not very CPU bound for a game, and that's pretty impressive. And your system memory is still 12 gigs. Also impressive. But here's where kind of an oddity comes in. You need an RTX 2060 or a Radeon RX 5700 XT. And that's interesting to me, because the fact is that a 5700 XT stomps a 2060. I don't care who you are. So what that's starting to mean to me is that I believe that they may actually be using DLSS with this 2060 at 1440p ultra settings. Because if you're saying that you need either one of these cards to play 1440p ultra, well, the 5700 XT is much more powerful than a 2060. But the 2060 could get pretty close with DLSS, and we know that Cyberpunk is going to have DLSS, and that's going to play later into this as well, guys, so stick with me, right? So 6 gigs of VRAM, 70 gigs of SSD space, once again. So here we go. for 4K ultra settings. You need an i7 4790 or a Ryzen 5 3600. So that's going to be good for a lot of y'all. A lot of y'all have a Ryzen 5 3600 or a better i7 equivalent, or even an i5 at this point. There's many i5s that are better than this, but keep on moving. 16 gigs are finally recommended in its full state. So you're going to want those 16 gigs, guys, for sure, which I don't think many of you at this kind of settings, I don't know who wouldn't be running 16 gigs at this point, but nonetheless. So then we move into the GPUs, and once again, this is where I'm carrying over that DLSS idea, is that they're recommending a 2080 Super, an RTX 3070, or a 6800 XT. Obviously, guys, a 6800 XT stomps a 2080 Super. It also stomps a 3070. So why on earth would this be the AMD equivalent to these two? And I believe it's because these two cards are using DLSS in order to achieve this setting. And I'm sure that these are probably playing at 60 frames a second. That's what I'm assuming from CD Projekt Red. They know that most gamers on PC, which this is what this is for, are playing at 60 FPS now. So I'm hoping that these are not all set up for 30 FPS. Obviously, we don't have any FPS markings anywhere, so we don't know, but I'm going to assume 60. So your VRAM usage, you're going to need 8 gigs at least. So obviously that fits into all these cards here. The 6800 XT has doubled in that. And once again, 70 gigs of SSD space. So now we're jumping into our green category over here, our ray tracing category. And this is where I told you guys I was going to give you a little bit of information. So CD Projekt Red has said that AMD's ray tracing will not be supported on day one. So for all you guys out there that landed an RX 6000 series GPU, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to run for you with ray tracing on day one, and they didn't give a date on when that was coming. And that's why I believe personally that this is green. And on top of that, look right here, we only have RTX cards listed as the GPUs recommended. And once again, that's because AMD will not have ray tracing available in Cyberpunk 2077 on launch, and we don't know when it's coming. So I'm sorry guys, but that's just how it's going to be for a little while, but let's go ahead and jump into it. So for 1080p ray tracing on medium settings, medium guys, you're going to need an i7 4790 or Ryzen 3 3200G. Once again, very, very obtainable CPUs, and not many people have them honestly anymore, but you do need the 16 gigs of system memory and an RTX 2060 at minimum. I believe, guys, once again, this is because with ray tracing enabled, and I believe throughout here as well, they're implementing DLSS in this. I really, truly do. So let's jump into 1440p with ray tracing on Ultra. You need an i7 6700 or a Ryzen 5 3600. And this is an interesting comparison because I would like to know which one of these CPUs is actually better than the other. That'd be a really interesting test to find out. But let's keep on moving, right? Very obtainable CPUs, and a lot of people have these, so that's good news. 16 gigs of memory again, a-okay. But here's where it gets tough. A RTX 3070. Now, we know that RTX 3070 is very similar to the 2080 Ti, so you'll probably be okay here. You may not have as good of ray tracing. You may be looking at 2 to 3%, maybe 5% at max, less performance with your 2080 Ti. But guys, that'll be okay. It will. And jumping into ray tracing Ultra. This is for 4K ray tracing Ultra. This is the big one, guys. It's still only recommending an i7 6700 or a Ryzen 5 3600. And that kind of surprised me. I'm sure this game will run better if you have a better CPU, but they're only recommending that this is what you need for this setting. Once again, 16 gigs of system memory, but an RTX 3080. And that's a bummer because most people cannot get a 3080. 3070s have been much more obtainable, but the 3080 is still pretty elusive. So that's kind of a bummer, guys. But you'll need one if you want to play 4K ultra settings with ray tracing turned on for Cyberpunk 2077. And once again, 10 gigs of VRAM. That's crazy to me. But we're going to see that at more of a trend moving forward in games. So guys, that's it. That's all we got to talk about today. Those are your Cyberpunk 2077 system requirements, and they're kind of a doozy, especially if you don't have an RTX card, guys. I'm sorry for you AMD guys out there that don't have DLSS and you don't have ray tracing. Basically, you got to have a high-end AMD card in order to play this game at good settings, at least. I mean, if you're planning on playing on low settings and that's all you care about, more power to you. You got it, man. But if you want to play on high settings, you're going to need a good GPU. Luckily, you don't have to have a great CPU, so there is a caveat to this. So that's great, guys. Those are the system requirements, and that's all I got today. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and let me know down below what you think about this. Did you think these system requirements were too high? Did you think they were too low? Were they what you expected? Or were they totally out of the ballpark? Because I don't know. But let me know what y'all think down below. I'm signing out. Adios, guys.